Right boys, if you're a similar age to me or slightly older, so I'm around 30, I'm 28, so if you're around 30 or slightly older, you might remember a time before mental health was a thing. Now you might be thinking, what are you on about? It's not like somebody just invented mental health. Everybody's like had depression or people have had this for a long time. What I mean is, now we have quite a large vocabulary around mental health, so we can talk about it and express it quite well, and we can communicate around it quite well. But I remember, and this was probably when I was around 16 or slightly younger, when you didn't really talk about it. You know, men didn't talk about their mental health, and I don't really think women talked about their mental health in the way we do now, because women, it's quite common for them to talk about their feelings, but not in like a structured, how do I solve this mental health problem way. They talk about how they feel, because men are logical and women for the most part are emotional. Now that's a stereotype, but stereotypes are a thing for a reason. So what I mean is, there was a time when you didn't really communicate about your mental health. You could quite easily talk about your physical health. I've sprained my ankle, I've broke my arm, or I've got cancer, but you didn't really talk about mental health. There was just a time when we didn't have a vocabulary for it. It didn't mean people weren't experiencing poor mental health, but they just didn't talk about it in the way they do now. And I sort of viewed myself, so you might remember that time when you had down days and you just got on with it. Men that got PTSD from say men that were in the military, they didn't really get treated for it. They just dealt with it. And now, so I kind of viewed myself at 16 and slightly younger as one of those people that didn't have any of those things. I'm not depressed, I'm not anxious, that's for that person over there. And I had to change my identity associated with that. But at the moment, I am like that with, say, cancer, and you might be like that. Cancer is something other people get, and it's not something I've got. If I get diagnosed with cancer, then I'll have to I'd have to update my identity. But at that time, mental health, that's something other people get. It's quite a fringe thing, and there was still like stigma associated with it. Even like autism now, I'm having to update my identity around autism. I used to think autism was things other people get. Now I'm like, I actually have a lot of the signs of autism, so maybe I need to update how I view myself. So you might be able to relate to that. Mental health was a thing that other people got, and then I had to shift to where I was experiencing all of these things. I was having severe depression, and when I was depressed, I'd updated my identity from somebody that didn't get depression to somebody that did. But I still wasn't the kind of person that got anxiety. When I'd hear about other people talk about anxiety, I'd think, oh, that's something you get, but that's not me. And then when I cured the depression, because now you have a whole life ahead of you, and you've got something to live for, now you're anxious, because you've got like 80 years of life where you've now got to plan and worry about all the things that could go wrong. So then I had to update, now I'm somebody that's anxious, but I don't really identify with the depression as much, or that comes and goes. So yeah, if you're an older guy, you might be able to relate to that. And you remember a time when we didn't really talk about it, we just got on with mental health. And I think we've made good progress. We've come to a point where now we can talk about it. And like, this is how far we've come. So we've come from a point where you wouldn't even talk about it to your parents. I remember the first time I spoke to a friend. That was like my first port of call, a female friend. I told her that I was like depressed. And that was a big step for me. I thought, people don't talk about this. Then I spoke to my mum and then my dad. And like, me talking to my dad about mental health at that time seemed quite a big step. Now I just talk about it openly. I'm talking about it on YouTube. And for my dad to talk to me about mental health would have been unheard of. Him talking to his dad about mental health just wouldn't have been a thing. So I think I tend to find that I'm quite early to trends, and this is a trend. Having depression is a trend I would have liked to have not been early to. But I found I was talking about it quite openly before the stigma had been lowered. And then I think the flu thing that I'm not going to mention on YouTube, 2019, that shut the world down, opened the floodgates. Everybody, as far as I could tell, most people anyway, because our life was kind of like switched around, most people dealt with some sort of mental health because you're at home, your job and your routine is completely changed. Then the communication and the conversation around mental health really became widespread. There's no stigma, everybody knows it's a thing, everybody knows, just like it doesn't surprise people when somebody walks in with a cast on their leg because they broke their leg. You don't go, oh, he's that type of guy that gets a broken leg. We all know that everybody can get a broken leg, and we now all know that everybody can suffer with mental health issues. So there's a shift, and you might remember, if you're a younger guy, you've probably always been able to talk about this. And just to illustrate where we've come to, before, ex-military guys wouldn't have spoke about PTSD, they wouldn't have spoke about depression, they would have just suffered in silence. Now, I went for a phase where I watched these like YouTube documentaries, and I think this is Lad Bible. I don't know when Lad Bible went from being Lad Bible to being like a different version of Vice, but it was a video of like an interview with ex-gangsters, and I think one guy had been shot in the head, or like really outrageous. You might know the videos I'm talking about, but you'll get a guy, an ex-mobster, like been to prison for 20 years, shot people, very like a gangster, a London gangster, and halfway through the interview he'll break down and talk about his trauma and his mental health. Now that wouldn't have happened before. You know, these gangsters just wouldn't have spoke about this. And it's because the stigma's lowered, everybody knows it's a thing. So you might be able to relate to that, and you've probably experienced some sort of mental health issue. And the reason I mention that is because that's like a step in the right direction. That is the ability to talk about these things. And I just see that progression moving forward and forward. So when I talk about trauma, that might seem like a weird word to you, or you know, people talk about inner child work or speaking to your soul. You might think, oh yeah, that's a bit far, but there was a time when we couldn't talk about like depression as men and as just generally as people. But I see that's where, as humans, because we have access to information and we're all connected, like through the internet and even with AI now, there is going to be a psychological, like a philosophical or a spiritual awakening. It's just happening. People are becoming more in tune with who they are and more in tune with reality. And the more we talk, the more that happens. So when I talk about trauma, we've come from a point when we couldn't talk about depression. And I think the next step is just talking about trauma because it's very real. So life in general is very chaotic and traumatic. So to actually get through life without any trauma, very few people will do that. So chances are there are some sort of traumatic things that you're trying to deal with, or you don't even know. It's like under the surface. And if you just think of life, even like the act of childbirth is it's just very traumatic for the woman's body especially. But the whole thing is traumatic. Having children is traumatic. Being a child and being disciplined, it's all trauma. Even just like, say, miscarriage. The fact that a miscarriage is a thing for both for both parents involved, that is a very traumatic thing that you have to deal with. Relationships failing, losing parents, losing your job, uncertainty around money, uncertainty around food. It's all very traumatic, and to just think that everybody gets through life and none of it affects people it's not reality. So I think we can all now come to the point, there's no stigma associated with mental health, and we can all kind of agree that trauma is real. We accumulate trauma through the fact that life is hard. And if you look back through time, like life is fairly easy now, but if you look back through time, and sometimes you hear stories like from history And the amount of trauma, the level of trauma that people went through is mental, but we still experience it now. Even just injuries. Like I cut my hand with a chainsaw and almost had to have one of my fingers amputated. Well, my uncle, for example, has one leg. He crashed his motorbike around 19 years old and spent multiple years in hospital getting severe treatment. He was in hyperbaric chambers because his leg went gangrene. At 19 or 20, had to have his leg removed. That's traumatic. Do you know what I mean? Very few of us get through life to our deathbed without trauma. So if we can just accept that that is a reality of life, and there's probably something that you're holding on to or that you haven't quite got over yet, and what we do is we just escape from it. So we use all manner of vices, whether it's food, gambling, alcohol, porn, other relationships. Do you know what I mean? There's a lot we have access to, drinking alcohol, that can numb the pain. So if that's something that resonates with you and you do think, oh yeah, or maybe even just think about it in terms of trauma, because depression you think is just a mood that you experience, but trauma has its roots in something very real, something that occurred and you haven't got over it. So that's just to preface what I'm going to talk about, to think about trauma in that way and to be able to talk about it and not think, oh yeah, trauma, that's something that other people get. That sounds a bit gay or whatever. I'm not against gays, that's just what came to my mind. But, well, that's something other people get and that's not me, I just deal with it. In reality, you're probably not dealing with trauma very well. So this is the strategy, this is my actionable step on how to deal with trauma. And the actual tip is deep journaling. But there's 3 parts to it. So I call it the trauma triangle, and you need to do all 3, otherwise you're not going to fully heal from trauma. So in the book The Body Keeps the Score by, I don't even know how to pronounce the author's name, but The Body Keeps the Score, he says basically how to heal from trauma. And you'll probably, if you've read a few books, non-fiction books, you've probably come to a similar conclusion to me, that books have basically one point and then the other 300 pages are just reiterating the same point and giving examples and stories and anecdotes based on that point. So I wish these books would just write the introduction, write the one line of the point, and then let you read the rest of the book if you want to. But in The Body Keeps the Score, the point was this: life is hard. We deal with the difficulty of life or trauma, usually with addiction, and the resolution of trauma is clearly and fully communicating the traumatic thing. It's that simple. All therapy, all cognitive, every form of therapy that is trying to resolve trauma comes down to this. And there's a lot of people that go through therapy week after week, session after session, that get nowhere. And this is the answer. And you don't even need a therapist for it. The resolution of trauma is completely and fully communicating the traumatic thing. And if you think about it, a trauma is something's happened in your life. So say it's a failed relationship. You are holding on to that. Or say you was in a war zone and you now have PTSD. So that's trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder. Life was normal. Then you had a traumatic experience. And then you're holding on to that traumatic experience because you need to learn the lessons to try and avoid it in the future. So your body binds to it and says, right, I'm going to remind you of this every day, and you're going to hold this with you until you come up with a solution to the problem, because otherwise, if you do it again, I don't know if I can handle that. So if you have a bad relationship, or you have a good relationship that goes bad, you've experienced the good, you had the good relationship, it went bad. Now you're going to hold that as trauma, because if you get into another relationship, your mind and body is already anticipating, well, if you got that last one wrong or something went wrong, chances are that will happen again, and we need to protect ourselves from it. So the reason fully and completely communicating the thing solves the problem is because it allows you to learn the lessons, right? So now you know that's how you do it. The trauma triangle allows you to actually learn the lessons. So normally if you communicate the thing, you might have poor sleep and brain fog from the poor diet you've got. So my trauma triangle is deep journaling, which is a form of communicating the thing, sleep, and your brain rewires during sleep and it learns lessons. So if you play the piano today and don't sleep, that's not going to go in as well as if you play the piano, sleep on it, you'll be much better at playing tomorrow. And if you consistently sleep, it rewires the brain. So you've got deep journaling, sleep, and then the other part is mental clarity. So you have to have mental clarity, and if you're eating a poor diet, scrolling social media, TikTok, these all like confuse the brain. Watching porn, gambling, alcohol, it all numbs the senses and the cognitive ability. So for this to work, so say you're going to therapy, you might have a poor diet and you're not sleeping very well because you work nights. So you're paying this therapist, I don't know how much therapy is, but you're going like week after week, not sleeping, and you have no mental clarity, and all they're getting you to do is to recite the traumatic event. So you're just reliving the traumatic thing, you're not really fully expressing it, and your brain can't learn the lessons. So when you implement this, the first thing you need is mental clarity, and it's what I've gained since doing the carnivore diet, and I've spoke about this before. I had my experience in Turkey where I ate the wrong things, and now I know what the optimal diet is for me. But now I've realised, because I've been eating a suboptimal diet for my brain, I've built up so many traumas and so many issues in my head that I haven't been able to resolve because I've never had the mental clarity to even recognise it or ask the question. So that's what you need to do. You need to prioritise sleep and mental clarity. Whatever is causing you brain fog, you need to eliminate it. And I would start with food, then start with all of the other vices. And it's usually social media wrecks your brain. So once you've got mental clarity, then you can deep journal. And you don't need a therapist for this. You can do this with a friend, but I think it's better on your own. So you get a piece of paper, you get a black pen and a red pen. And at the top of the paper, you ask a question directly to yourself. So you say you know what the trauma is, and we're going to talk about, we'll just give the example of a failed relationship. Why, so you write the question at the top of the page, why did this relationship fail? Now if you think about it, you probably haven't asked yourself that question. You've come out of the relationship, you're sad, you miss the person, or you're, whatever it happens to be, you're feeling the feelings, but you didn't actually ask, why did it fail? You're just going to numb your senses with all these bad habits until your next relationship and hope it doesn't fail. But you haven't actually learned anything. But if you can fully express, what did I like about that relationship? What do I miss? These are all deep questions, so this is why it's called deep journaling. What do I miss about that relationship? What do I not miss? What things about that relationship am I quite glad that I'm not having to experience anymore? What are the pros? What are the cons? And you might find the list is, there's a bias in one direction. And if it's like, you might write the list. So you might be sad and holding on to this trauma because you are sad about the relationship ending, right? But if you ask yourself the question, what are the pros and cons of this relationship? There might be 3 pros and 12 cons, right? Because I had this, come out of a relationship and I was like really sad because I missed it. This is a bad example actually, but or I was kind of resentful to the person because they did wrong me towards the end of the relationship, and I thought there was no need. I wouldn't treat somebody else like that, so why have they treated me like this? And I was holding on to that resentment, and they live close by, so I was reminded of it regularly. So what I did was, and I held on to this for months, and I was like, right, you need to deep journal this. So I wrote down, what were the pros and cons of the relationships? of the relationship, and there was like 20 pros and 3 cons. There was 3 things that was I felt like had done me wrong, and 20 really good things. And I was like, right, now write down the good times, all the good like days you had, the good times you had together, and then write down the bad. And there was like 30 good times. It was a very good summer last year, do you know what I mean, because of this relationship. And then 3 bad things. And I was like, well, this is traumatizing you. Every time you see the person, it's pissing you off, and I think I had borderline PTSD from it, because the person lives very close and they would come up to work and meet me from work. So I had all these associations. When I was struggling to go to work, I was struggling to walk down my street, and I can actually hear her from my house. That like she lives 2 doors down, and I can actually hear her, and every time I heard her, it triggered like this anxious PTSD response, and it wasn't helpful, and that is trauma. So I was like, right, the pros way outweigh the cons. And now, but I didn't see that with my mind. Like, I was just holding on to the 3 bad things and the 3 wrongs, not the 30 good things. So when you deep journal, and that's therapy, you don't need some therapist to tell you, oh, well, maybe the person like did you good. You can do that yourself, and only you can do that. Your therapist isn't going to know the answers. So you ask yourself meaningful questions, deep questions. What were the pros and cons? Now, if there was a load of cons and like 3 pros, that's going to help you as well, because the relationship wasn't resourceful, and it's good that you're not in it. In my case, there was loads of pros and loads of good days. So I was like, well, every time you hear this person, or you see them walk past the house, or you see them at work, you had a good year. There's so many good experiences that you would have maybe not have had. So now whenever I see the person, I'm like filled with gratitude, and I'm like, oh, I hope they're doing well, and I hope I don't hold any resentment, because I'm grateful. If I hadn't have had that year with that person, I wouldn't have had a lot of those experiences. So now it does the opposite. Instead of like post-traumatic stress disorder, it's like post-traumatic gratitude disorder or order, whatever you'd call it. Because now when I see the person, I'm like, oh, there's 30 things that I'm grateful for, instead of the 3 things that piss me off. So, but you can't come to that conclusion unless you have all 3 parts of the trauma triangle. You need mental clarity, sleep, and deep journaling. So that's the actionable step. Give deep journaling a go. And you don't need to be traumatized, or this is just good at progressing through life and learning lessons quickly. You might find there's this thing that's been hanging over your head. For men, it's normally a girl. Do you know what I mean? You either wanted the girl and couldn't get her, and that's traumatized you, or that's like bothers you. And you can hold on to these traumas for 10 years. I see people that are like 60 years old, and I think, bruv, that thing happened to you when you was 14 or 19 or 25, and you're still a bit resentful, a bit depressed, and a bit traumatized by it. So this allows you to leave that behind, but you have to fully and completely communicate the thing. And writing is the best way. And you keep writing. I did like a full day, multiple days, since coming back from Turkey when I haven't been making YouTube videos. Every hour of the day that I've had free, I'm just deep journaling. And you rewrite it, until you've fully exhausted everything there is to write about that thing. And this helps as well if you're trying to make progress with something. You tend to not, it's like Groundhog Day. You go through the same problems every day, and you might have this one thing that's nagging you, and it keeps coming up in your mind. Oh, maybe I should, it could be silly, maybe I should change my car, but what car do I get? Do I need a people carrier? Like, do I need 4 seats, or, you know what I mean? Just something. Or should I get another tattoo? What tattoo should I get? I did this for like 10 years with tattoos. When my brother got his sleeve, I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to get some tattoos. Couldn't decide. All that time, because I never actually communicated what it is I wanted. That's a trivial one, and I wouldn't recommend getting tattoos. I'll do a video on tattoos. So Ask the question, and this helps you progress quickly because we tend to make the same mistakes over and over again. So ask the deep question, why did the relationship fail? What is it I miss about the relationship? Why do I miss that? And you learn a lot about yourself, because say you miss, I'll just try and give an example, and you just keep asking why. You know how children, they say, why is the sky blue? And you say, because of the atmosphere or whatever. And then they go, but why? They just keep drilling down into that question. You do this with yourself. So why am I sad now that I'm not in this relationship? Because we used to go for sea swims and I enjoyed doing it with somebody else because I saw the joy that it put on her face, and now I'm doing it on my own, or I'm doing it with the boys and it's not quite the same. Well, why do I miss that? And you kind of think, well, you're still getting the same joy out of trying to deep journal on camera like this, that was a bad example, but do it for yourself. Ask the deep question, then ask why, until it's fully communicated. With me, I had to do this with diet. Why do I keep eating foods that I know are not helpful for me, not healthy for me? Why do I keep doing that? Because I keep doing it over and over, and every time I do it, I pay the price with mental and physical health issues. So why do I keep doing it? Well, you keep doing it because it's a way of managing stress. You've removed a lot of the other vices. You don't watch porn. You don't scroll social media unnecessarily. You don't smoke. You don't drink. You don't have caffeine, and now you don't eat. You don't have a partner that you can rely on. At the moment, you don't have any way of managing stress. So that was my answer. I keep going back to this because it's the only stress management I have. What's the solution to that? Well, the solution is you need to manage stress. So that could be sea swims, that could be go to the gym. When you feel you're stressed, time in nature, meditation. Now I have a solution. So that's the format. Ask the deep question, then ask why, and then ask what's the solution. And we never do this. We just ruminate. Oh, I miss that person. And then tomorrow you get poor sleep, and then tomorrow, oh, I miss that person. You can do that for 10 years of missing someone. Or you can sit down and go, I miss that person. Why do I miss that person? What's the solution? So say the sea swims. I miss the look on that person's face when we used to go in the sea because I really realised it brought her joy. Well, there are a lot of people at my gym. I could say, oh, I go to the sea. I do a sea swim on Friday at 8 a.m. Do you want to come with me? Offer that to everybody that I come in contact with. One of them's going to come and one of them's going to really enjoy it. And then that's the solution. Waiting or hoping that I could go back to the time when me and my girlfriend went isn't going to be the solution. But you keep falling back on that. So I think you get the idea. But that is the power of deep journaling. And you can use it for trauma and just solving problems and moving forward with your life. And I've been doing this with minimalism. I like minimalism and I like removing things out of my life and not having too much clutter. I do removals with a friend, like house moving. So we pack up people's houses, put them in the van and then move them. And the amount of shit and clutter, and my other friend actually works with hoarders, so he's got first-hand experience. It's unnecessary. You're born in this life with nothing and you die with nothing. But possessions, getting rid of them is very difficult. And something I've used is deep journaling. Do I need this book? So I had quite a large collection of books, and I've read the books and I don't need them anymore, but I was keeping hold of them. Do I need this book? And you instantly go, yeah, I want to keep it. Why do I need it? Have I gained the knowledge that I wanted to from this book? Yes. Is it serving me? Is it a ball ache to get it in and out of the loft and I feel like it's sat there and... Do you know what I mean? It's mental... Anything you have in your life is mental bandwidth. Would I rather not have the book and just have a clear mind? I've gained the knowledge, yes. Can I get rid of the book? Yes. And I've done this with a lot of possessions and some are more meaningful. I recently sold my car and motorbike and I deep journaled on that. And you know what to deep journal on because it's thoughts that keep reoccurring. So for about a year, I had the thought of, you work 5 minutes around the corner, your gym's around the corner, the only thing you really need a car for is to go to the farm and get beef, eggs and cheese and all that. Not cheese, butter. But you could do that. I've got access to 2 other cars and a bike. You should probably sell your car. And then I forget about it, but my car insurance isn't due yet or whatever, you know. And then it will reoccur. You should sell your car, you don't need your car. If you have those reoccurring thoughts over and over, that's something, like that's a waste of your brain. Think of other things you could be thinking about. And the way you get it out of your brain is you deep journal. Should I sell my car, yes or no? And you make the decision now. So I deep journal, should I sell my car? What are the pros and cons of having a car? And the cons outweighed the pros. Decision made, sold the car. Same with my motorbike. Should you sell your motorbike? I kept having the thought that I should sell it. What are the pros, what are the cons? One of the cons was the motorbike didn't really run right. It had an issue. It run good enough where I could use it regularly, but that was enough to tip the balance. So yeah, sold the motorbike. And you can do this with quite meaningful things, especially if you're doing big life decisions. Where should I, if you're thinking of buying a house or relocating, deep journal on it. Why am I drawn to Portugal? Or, yeah, why am I drawn to Portugal? What is it specifically? What are the pros and cons? And you can normally solve a lot of problems this way. And you, as humans, we have the ability to look into the crystal ball and predict the future. If I make this decision, like I pretty much worked out all of the pros and cons of selling my car before I did it. So I could predict. Whereas if you don't deep journal and you don't have these 3 things, so you've got poor sleep, no mental clarity and you're not deep journaling, you might sell your car and then a week later think, fuck, I need my car. And I've done this before, but now with mental clarity, sleep and deep journaling, you basically don't make crap decisions. So anyway, I hope that helps. I hope that kind of makes sense. And let me know if that's something you have used or you use and it's beneficial for you. But deep journaling, sleep and mental clarity. And let me know if there's certain things or themes that are common with people. I would say relationships are going to be a big one. Ex-military is obvious, PTSD. So if there's anything, because I like learning about what you guys kind of struggle with, or we're all human and they're all human experiences. But let me know what things would be traumas for you guys. So, as always, chop wood, carry water. Have a good day, boys. I'll speak to you tomorrow.